Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome to the Video Marketing Made Easy podcast, where we believe that video is the most powerful way to monetize your message, stand out in the market, and grow your business. In this podcast, we talk about practical strategies to grow your business with video. So if you struggle with growing your audience and getting the word out about your podcast, your product service, we're doing a podcast. We're here to help you. I'm Josh Crandall, and I'm joined with Dallin today. And
What's up, everyone?
yay. And today's topic, we wanted to talk about why you should be making movement building content before educational content in order to stand out. And Dallin, our specialist here, marketing specialist basically, and Wiz is gonna share some insight on why that is. It might, at least to me, it was kind of a new concept, Dallin. It's pretty interesting to bring up. But let's talk about it for a little bit. Why should you be creating movement building content rather than educational first?
Yeah, definitely. Well, what I find is that a lot of brands, entrepreneurs, no matter what stage they are in their business, don't stand out. And they don't stand out because they are trying to publish too much education content, how-to content, because they're catering to the algorithms, all the SEO work, which definitely has its time and place. And for sure, you should be doing that. Otherwise, you won't be discovered organically or for free, on Google and YouTube. But in doing that, you're putting out all of this Facebook Live content. We're actually doing one right now and recording this, putting out all this YouTube content. This is also YouTube based, as you should, right, to get that attention. But what happens is that if you are talking only about how to do something, right? Those 10 steps, which sometimes become a catchy blog article. But what happens at the end of the day is that anyone can go and put out education content. And a lot of education content is going to look the same because there's only so many ways to do something. If you're going to tell someone how to write a blog on WordPress and that becomes your education content, how many other types of videos are you going to find on, say, YouTube or blog articles that are going to be about that topic? That's not going to allow you to stand out because everyone can talk about that topic in almost the same exact way. And so what happens is you struggle to really be different. You struggle to really build a movement around your content. Because really, at the end of the day, in order to create content that does stand out, and this, when I say content, we're talking about videos, podcasts, blog posts, social posts, whatever it may be that involves the written, the visual, the audio form of content, any content. In order to stand out, you need to invite people into a story that's about them. You need to speak to their identity. You need to help them feel the sense of belonging. And that's why we call it movement building content, because when they can feel that sense of belonging and connection to what you're talking about, and that you understand them deeply, and you build that connection with them, they can feel like, oh my goodness, like it's not just helping to feed my mind, but it's helping to feed my soul and the heart behind what I want to do, or what they're up to. Because if you think about some of your favorite brands today, you are not following them because they are educating you on how to do X, Y, or Z, but they are helping you become a better version of yourself. And if you think of some of the most recognized movements out there, whether it's social, political, religious, business-based, the most popular ones are built around this idea of a movement, and they give people a sense of identity. What we do is we call our clients and our audience visionaries, because at the end of the day, we believe your vision is only as powerful as your ability to communicate and talk about it. Mm-hmm. And, it's and part of our mission, in fact, that relates to movement building content is the belief that we believe it's time for you to take a stand for what you believe and fully commit to the brand mission you feel called to build. We're here with our Video Supply brand to help you clarify, create, and communicate your vision for a more happier, meaningful life, business, and community. And that's only done through your ability to communicate a clear message and invite people into that story that you're telling. And that's all about the movement building content. Josh, so what have you seen? So for some context, I guess, I hired Josh probably about 6 months ago, pulled him away from his previous career employer to be like, hey, come work and to help me build this brand. And in his previous work, and he still consults and works with them. He did a lot of nonprofit work, right, Josh? So how would you say nonprofits and those who are all about brand awareness and communicating a message and getting people to buy into a cause, how do nonprofits or brands like that create movement building content?
That is a good question. So what's really neat about and you were talking about feeding an algorithm, right? And so it's like what content you got to put out there to become relevant, right? So there's, I think, and sometimes it's perspective, sometimes it's whether it's misinformation or whether it's a strategy. I mean, sometimes you need to feed that animal. You need to feed the algorithms in order to get out there and to stand out. But yeah, it's so important to build that content. So to answer your question, how do nonprofits? So I did work with them. I worked with UL Firefighter Safety Research Institute, focused mainly on firefighting, increasing firefighters' knowledge in order to, let them be more effective. And in turn, that'll save more lives and protect more property, which is what firefighters do. And so these nonprofit organizations have got a special mission to achieve, and it's only as relevant as you can make it, right? And so I got brought on as a full-time video creator. It was kind of a special role because it was extremely unique. I didn't know, I don't know of anybody who had the money to invest in a video department, but then also to put the time and effort into that marketing messaging. And so, we created content that was very educational, very, I guess, documentary type-ish. But then we had an opportunity to promote kind of a life-saving message, and it's called Close Before You Doze, right? So that promotes closing your door before you go to sleep at night, or closing your doors if you leave the house or whatever it is. And so that, because doors can act as a barrier to stop, products of combustion, heat, fire, whatever, from moving throughout the house, right? So it's, so you should close your door before you go to sleep at night. There's a free plug for them. But basically, we wanted to promote this message, right? We wanted to create a movement around Close Before You Doze because if you think of stop, drop, and roll, you think about how many people combust spontaneously, right? You always hear about stop, drop, and roll in case you get on fire. I've never been on fire. I don't know many people, maybe one who needed to do something like stop, drop, and roll. But we wanted to get this message out, right? We wanted to build this movement behind it. So what did we need to do, right? And it was one of our efforts to create this public service announcement, basically. And we made a different approach to our regular approach, right? So we are so used to putting out this educational content. We said, what if we speak to the individual here and try to reach them, try to make a connection with them through video? Because, if you really think about it, the videos that really stand out to you, at least to me, I can say this for me, but I think the videos that stand out for most people are ones where they've felt that connection. They've felt part of a movement. They felt like, wow, I could be a change for something better in the world, right? And those really, really stand out. And so I approached the director of the Institute one day and I said, hey, look, what if we approach it in a different way? And I showed up some examples of brands that have reached out to their audience to make a more of a connection. And I used the example of Dove. They did a video on where they connect with their audience through. They did an artist, right? They took an artist and had him draw somebody based on how they were describing themselves, and then they had somebody come in and draw them based on how that person saw them. And there were two very different sketches. One was very self-critical, and then the other was a lot, more pleasant. And so then they showed it to him. It was very heartwarming, and it was by Dove, right? Dove is I think it's just a soap. company, right? They
Yeah,
make
it's got
soap.
shampoo and conditioner, but yeah,
Yeah,
the product itself is very simple, right? Like how many
yeah,
shampoos are out there, but what did they do? What you're speaking to, right, is like
hmm
they spoke to a greater movement that
exactly.
transcends the product itself.
Yeah. So what we did, so I approached him with that. I said, "What if we?" I literally said, "What if we build a structure we can burn inside of it?" Which is what we typically did there. We actually, to do our fire experiments, we build structures, set them on fire, and film them and study firefighting tactics. But I was like, "What if we build a structure that we can take the walls off and basically show like, here's what it looks like with your door closed in a fire. Here's what it looks like if it's open, right?" And then we'll take individuals, kind of do a focus group, and then show them that experience, right? And it wasn't I mean, it was intended to be educational, but it was wrapped in more of a movement type thing. So we wanted the viewer to connect to the father who has children sleeping at home, or the stay-at-home mom who, also wants to protect their children. But really, there was learning through this experience, and it really allowed the viewer to connect. And this campaign, this particular year, went crazy viral. Good Morning America caught onto it, and we actually built another structure to do another one of these burns in the year after, and the reach of that was, through the analytics and the marketing analytics that we did, was the reach was around 1 billion is what it was.
That's insane.
Yeah. So I mean, it was absolutely insane, and 1 billion impressions is what it was. So the it was just a fantastic change to the simple educational content, like, hey, here's another fire safety message, right? Rather than like, hey, look at this, and this is how real people feel about this. Here's how you might feel about it. Here's this experience, right? And so that movement that it created, I mean, there was so much behind it, and I think, and you might have to help me remember. I don't know if it was, is it Story in Motion or something like that. I remember somebody saying, "You speak to the heart to move the mind," and really that was the premise behind doing this whole thing, was to show real people, make a connection, and you as a viewer, with your invested time, you experience that change with them. So yes, like, yeah. So as you're building educational content, why are people going to come to you? They're going to come to you because they trust you, right? And so you get people to trust you. You got to make that connection. So, yes, building movement, building content before educational content is going to help you greatly increase your impact. So that was a long answer to your question, Dallin.
No, that was such a great answer though, because what's powerful about this is maybe not everyone out there, I guarantee you, not everyone out there are nonprofits. But what you can pull from this example is the fact that we all have a cause and a mission we're seeking to build, whether we are monetizing off that or not. We all need to sell people on ideas and the sense of belonging and connection, because in doing that, and then you can build demand. Josh, through this campaign and this movement building content that he built over in this particular instance, was all about kind of building that demand and that attention around this idea. It wasn't, it's not like you approach them and you built out this project with like, hey, let's do this educational video around how to close your door before you sleep. Step 1, approach your door. Step 2, close it. Step 3, climb into bed.
Yeah, pretty dry content.
Pretty dry. And anyone can go and create that. But what is harder to do, but often and almost always, I would say far more impactful, is the focus on how can we be more creative and different with this, but in a way that gets people to really stop and pay attention. And so as it relates to your business and what you stand for, is obviously before you can even create movement building content, you need to understand what is your movement actually about. Who are your people? What's your message? What's your vision for the future, for yourself, for your business, and the people that you serve? Because you can't create movement building content until you're clear on that. Because as you get clear on that, and as Josh had mentioned, then you can talk to people's identity. In this example of close before your doze and that kind of movement, you need to speak to the identity of the parent or whoever exactly was spoken to in this type of content, because that identity is where it's that's really born out of the heart in order to move the mind. And you find this in religious movements. Religiously, Christians identify as children of God, right? It's this sense of identity and belonging to a larger family that's bigger than themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can do that in your business and invite people into this movement that is bigger than them, that's bigger than you, and you can continue that conversation beyond just the education and the learning from you. Granted, let's say you're a coach or consultant or course creator out there, a lot of times the education content you put out there is to better their lives and it improves them and it gives them a sense of identity a little bit. And a lot of times people find that inside of your programs, your courses. But you need to be able to attract them through a sense of identity-based messaging. And so get clear on that. I mean, the step one before you go and hit record on anything is you need to actually know who you're talking to and what the identity is and what the movement is. And oftentimes, the description of a movement, and you think of some of the famous ones out there, good or bad, whether it's the Nazi movement or,
Yeah.
a positive religious movement or social movement, they all do something that follows a similar formula of movements that are being built. They give people a sense of a future vision or a future cause to believe in. Like, hey, if I follow this movement, if I do these things, my life will look like this. And so really painting that picture is really an essential piece of a movement, characteristic of a movement. Then there's an attractive hero or heroine, a leader that you can follow and stand behind. Religious movements have, maybe it's a prophet, maybe it's someone else who leads it. Political movement, it's usually the candidate. Social movement, it's usually the main voice behind it. You think of MLK, Martin Luther King, and so someone who is not attractive in the sense that they're physically attractive, but attractive in a sense that people want to be more like them. And that's why I think online courses and programs are so powerful, because there's a sense of transformation inside them where you're offering people to follow a similar path that you have followed to be successful. And so they're looking to you as that coach or that leader to guide them to success. And then, so yeah, those are two key characteristics. But then also there's a sense of a plan to follow as a third characteristic of a movement. So that plan should be simple, should be easy to follow, like easy in quotes. The journey may be hard, but like easy to understand. So you're not going to want to give people like, hey, in order to be successful to say become a visionary or to follow this movement, you're going to have to follow this 50-step plan.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't arrive there until you complete all 50 steps. That's going to overwhelm and complicate things, and people are going to go find some other movement to stand behind. And so keep it simple. Keep it to 3 steps, I would say. And then maybe within those steps, there are more micro steps to follow. But yeah, I would say 3 to maybe 5 steps. It keeps it simple. Anyone can understand it. But then as they're doing that, they can look to you as the guide, as a leader to follow, and then know that the place they're going to arrive at is a future vision of a lifestyle, of a business, successful business, what have you. Religious kind of speak to, the afterlife, right? And so it's that kind of future that you can believe in, and share that belief with those around you within that movement. So, yeah.
The in talking about and like you were saying before, you want to create messaging that stands out to them, right? So, I guess how would you help differentiate, someone who wants to build a movement type whether it's an ad or build a movement just in general, like, uh, how can you help distinguish like talking about yourself versus like talking about the movement, and which one to push, right? Because when do you bring yourself into the picture, etc. Like, because you and I, Don, we've talked about a little bit about on the podcast too about like you talking about all yourself and like creating, oh, here's my brand story. People aren't going to be as invested.
Not about you.
Yeah, exactly. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how do you distinguish, like talking about yourself versus your movement?
Totally. Well, I hate to use this as a reference, but let's speak of the Nazis real fast. You
I
think of
laughed
Adolf
earlier because
Hitler.
I didn't expect that. Yeah, so sorry.
Yeah, you're like, oh,
that's pretty. That's a lot of weight.
Oh no, it's true. Like, and that's why you got to recognize, movements are all based through perspectives, the belief systems, and so those often in a movement could be brainwashed or view their movement as, in quotes, the right way to do it, and while others view it as the wrong movement, and even if like, with common sense, with like morality, decency, integrity, like all those great attributes, and there's truly a positive movement that is bettering people's lives, there's still going to be opposition no matter what. There's always, as much as there is a hero of a movement that exists, there's always going to be the villain. There's always going to be the villain, people who oppose it. And so as far as the leader that people gather around, and not making the story about them, I would say you should always, particularly if you want to build a movement and focus on the standout type content, movements, because one of the third pieces is that leader element. You need to, if you want to be that leader and build that movement, you need to be part of your content. You need to be the face of your content, because if you don't give a face to this movement, then people are belonging to something that doesn't have that human connection behind it. If you're trying to say like make 50 people or the entire audience, the entire movement, the leader, then there's going to be confusion as to like, well, who's running the show, or who can I look up to? Who's truly painting the vision of the future? That's, Steve Jobs, right? Is someone we think of with Apple, and he built that type of movement of thinking different, and he became that face. Walt Disney became the face of the front runner of storytelling and creativity. And that's why those brands still exist today, is because they established the movement to then exist without them. Yet, even if you pass, you're still remembered as the leader of that movement. And so you should be in the content, but when you talk about this movement, you deliver messages within this movement. You need to speak about it from a way that's not all about I or me, because then you come off arrogant and self-centered, and you're far more personality driven, and you need to be about you, and speak to that audience. And so that's, it's a tricky line to follow, because there can be a lot of arrogance through the process and feeling like it is just about you, and sometimes the movements, because the movements that are truly meaningful, and leave a lasting impact in a positive way in the world, and that's one reason why we speak to that, in our mission statement and our vision for the future, is you want a more meaningful life, business, and community that is not about just one person, but it's about the many. It's about the people who are a part of it. And you can think of, politicians are the polarizing type that they build a movement. Sometimes it becomes about them, and sometimes it can be, it can attract the wrong things, and the right things at the same time. I don't want to make this political though, but politicians definitely become a clear leader of a movement, and you can definitely think of them. We won't call them out, but you can definitely think of current ones today that have both good and bad intentions sometimes. But that's going back to this idea though of movement building content. And then you may be asking yourself, okay, this is all great. I'm all for this. I bought in. I'm ready to create content around identity, around transforming beliefs, around building connections. But how? How do I
Mm-hmm.
do that? Well, that's where the tricky part comes in, right? Because we're speaking at this from an identity standpoint, from a movement building standpoint. But when you get to the how of how to actually create this content, guess what that turns into? The education side,
Yeah,
the education
definitely.
content that doesn't help you stand out. But that's where it's recognizing, okay, there's a time and a place for education type content to exist. And so once people can agree to stand with you and to be part of this movement, to believe in your mission as much as you do, then what you're going to need to do in order to help them more deeply understand this plan as part of the movement is you are going to have to educate them. That's why policies exist. That's why scripture exists in religious movements. That's why mission statements exist. That's why people put out more and more content. And that content will then be themed around this idea of furthering the movement. And so the education content you put out, though, shouldn't be like every once in a while. Yeah, maybe it's just strong catering to the algorithm and the SEO to be more searchable. But
Mm-hmm.
as quickly as possible, you want to make sure that people can identify on a deeper level than say just, hey, I'm intellectually bought in, but I'm not emotionally bought in.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a combination of both.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think about like how do you begin that movement? You know, how do you start that? You know, if you're already knee deep in your educational content, right? Like, how do you change it up, right? So I'm thinking about, and I don't know why I'm going to give this example, but in Idaho where I live, a few hours up the road is a place called Spencer, and they have an opal mine. And my wife and I went there one day to find opals, and there's this guy who's like the old sage of like opal digging, right? So they bring these rocks, they put them in a heap, and you stand on, you just dig in there and you're trying to find this opal. This guy approached us and he goes, "All right, here's how to do it. You gotta find a spot and dig like a badger, right?" It's like, what are you talking about? He's like, you find one spot and you go straight down, like focus on that one spot, and you're going to find something. And sure enough, like that's how we did it. You can't find them on the surface. You gotta kind of dig down deep, right? And so I think sometimes if you start diving down deep into your content, dive down into your audience, dive down into your, you know, um, it's not the story supply document. Help me out.
Yeah, you're talking about
Scripting.
messaging.
Yeah. So yeah, we talk about, we outline with our clients that we bring on the 5 Ps, right? Um, so really
Yeah, that's in
identifying,
the messaging framework.
yeah,
Yeah, story
definitely.
supply. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then by going through those 5 Ps, which is, you might have to help me here down, but it's, what does it start with?
Yeah, so it's people,
People, yep,
problem, perspective, plan, and
plan, and
payoff.
payoff. Yeah. So once you start diving down into those things and you outline those within your audience, you know, sometimes a movement just kind of naturally arises and you're saying, wow, this is staring me in the face. This is how I can create my movement, you know, basically, is helping to serve those 5 things. So of course, go to our website and find that resource, Video Supply Scripts. So videosupply.com/resources, you can find it there. But yeah, it'll help you really outline there. So how does somebody find that movement within their content, Dallin? How else would they do that?
Yeah, I love that question. Discovering that movement within your content is identifying like what is that common thread and what is the common message. Sometimes people talk about discovering your brand voice just through publishing, which is a powerful way, right? You get comfortable with being on camera, doing Facebook Lives, where you get all the mess ups. You practice, and that practice becomes more refined, and you start to see a common thread. But through the process, you should discover the movement type content through how you're talking about your audience, because they are your movement. The people you are serving are your movement. Without those people, you don't have a movement. You have stagnation. You have it just about you, and it's self-centered. Like it's a world that's just centered around you, and you want the world to be an invitation to others. And so, and going back to this idea of like, okay, this is all good, right? But how do you do this? Well, stay tuned for future episodes and future content. And even you can dig inside of our program, Video Supply, videosupply.com, to discover more about what it looks like to do the how. Yeah, you may understand like, hey, I want to be this visionary. I want to clearly understand my message, know how to communicate it, and then grow a movement around it. Then join us at Video Supply, and we will show you how to do that and walk you through the education side. Following our frameworks, we talk about the 5 Ps of messaging of your brand story. That's part of it. Getting clear on that, getting clear of who you're talking to and what story you're actually telling about your audience. But then how to translate that into scripts, how to translate that into any type of content you want to create. And then the process of actual creation to, the production of that content, to then promotion and distribution. All of these pieces play a role, from a lot of it being an education side, but giving you the tools to know how can I, at the end of the day, truly stand out. And that all comes down to movement building content, not education content.
Definitely. Got to get them where it counts, Dallin. Got to get it in the heart.
The heart to move the mind.
Yes.
Exactly.
I hope we don't get slammed for copyright on that or something.
Probably. Do they have a trademark? It's incredible. No, you guys can go check them out. They're called Story and Heart.
Story and Heart
is where I learned it from, or maybe it's Still Motion. It's a Portland-based company. But yeah, it's a great tagline, and it holds true. If anything else, that's just an evolution of many other forms of messages that you've heard over the years, where we all know there's an intellectual conversion to a way of thinking to an emotional through the heart, and the intellectuals through the mind. Yeah. And, if I sold my wife on why she should marry me just intellectually, then we would only get so far. Like, here's logically why it makes sense to marry me, but it takes an emotional transformation as well, and that's what we believe really comes through your ability to invite people into a movement in a story that's about them.
Definitely. Well, yes, like Dallin said, hang tight for more content. We're doing a podcast every week. Look for us online. You can visit contentsupply.com, videosupply.com. Go to our YouTube channel and look for more content. We share with you guys, everything you need to know about growing your audience and, connecting with them and getting the word out about your product and services. We have a bunch of resources on our website. And Dallin, I'll probably go ahead and turn you loose. But thank you again for joining today. And,
thanks, everyone.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys later. Catch you next week.